Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartophilus.
Sean, man, what's going on?
How you doing, John?
Doing great. Having a really good Sunday. Hope you are as well. And our listeners, too, when they're listening to this, are having a great day. Or as I like to say, a great now a lot of times, because you can't really control the past or the future. You can control the present, having a great right now. But really excited to have you on and talk about this. You've been so gracious in coming on the show really quickly, and texting you and emailing you has been a pleasure. So thank you for that. And this show's going to be a lot of fun. I know that for a fact.
You know, having me on, and I look forward to the conversation.
Definitely. So I'm sure, right, everyone, when they first meet you, they automatically go to what you're doing now, whether it's your coaching experience, whether it's all these cool events that you're doing. You did an event at the Barclays Center the other day, which we're going to talk about, but you're doing all these cool things. And I'm sure, right, that's what people jump to. But I know you have a really, everyone has their own story about falling in love with the game, right? I have mine. Everyone has one. How did you fall in love with the game of basketball to where right now it's what you wake up thinking about every day?
Long journey. I was fortunate enough to, have my father, Otis Birdsong, NBA All-Star 4 times, and played in the NBA for 12 years. It's really where my, love for the game started. Just being a young kid, being back in the 80s during the golden era of what they call the NBA. I was very fortunate to be around a lot of great basketball, of course, watching him on TV and also at the house. So I think when I was about maybe 7 or 8, I got my first, actually, I take it back. I was maybe about 5 or 6 years old. I remember my first portable basket. It was a Dr. J, the old Dr. J portable goal that we had in the basement. And I would just, had the little Nerf ball, and I was just shooting like that. So and then I eventually grew to 7 and 8 year old. And then we got one outside. So that's really where I started, loving the game, just watching my dad play.
That's awesome. I mean, obviously, right, seeing seeing what the world of hoops is like at a young age and seeing, right, what it could do for you is awesome. So you're talking about, right, being 7, 8 years old and getting and starting to see, have fun and playing it. But when did it become serious for you? When you said, I can play this at a high level?
Definitely high school. And I take it back, maybe 8th grade. Of course, like every other kid, YMCA ball, summer league ball as a kid, Pee Wee ball. But I think 8th grade was when I kind of turned the corner, because that's when I started to see the varsity coaches from, the feeder school come out, check out the team, start to talk to me a little bit and all of that. So building that kind of relationship during that time. So then I was like, okay, 8th grade, have fun, but going into high school is going to be the start of something potentially special.
Definitely. And then to that next step, right, for everyone, right, who's going to college and thinking about that next level. And what did it look like for you, whether making the decision on where to go to school, whether it's for studies, whether it's for basketball, how did that shape up what your future was going to look like?
Well, I had an actually interesting story, so all the high school years from my freshman to junior year, very successful, led a team in scoring, full years, had all kinds of different accolades. And I got fortunate, during my freshman summer year and sophomore summer year, was able to travel to, the Las Vegas big time tournaments, the Los Angeles tournaments, Adidas tournaments. They had Jordan Farmar, Dwight Howard at the time. So a lot of great talent, future NBA players. Was able to, speak to coaches and things like that. A good experience for me to get used to a environment of national talent. Basically, sophomore and junior year, going into my senior year, I had offers, from Indiana State, New Mexico, where Fran Fraschilla was there. I believe now he's a current ESPN analyst. Local, Division I schools in Kansas City, UMKC, had some looks KU. The unfortunate thing for me was at the time I broke my foot my senior year, and it was told to me that I should try the JUCO route. So that's really hindsight. I should have, in my personal opinion, maybe have taken a red shirt, but I went ahead and did the JUCO route. I was able to play 2 years at Highland Community College, and then I eventually ended up at Lincoln University, AA2 school. So the journey throughout college, from high school to college, it had its peaks and valleys, but it was still a good experience for me within that college space.
That's what I find fascinating, right? It's that right, the story you just laid out for us is so intricate, and it's someone that you don't hear very often, right? Someone going through that route to find right to chase that passion there's in playing basketball at the next level and having to go through that injury and overcoming that adversity. And you still ended up playing though professionally. So how did that end up happening to where you still were able to overcome those maybe hardships in college, or still balance it with school and all the academic stuff you were doing and the professional stuff you were doing, to then now still playing ball at that high of a level?
It was a open workout. I'm not sure you're familiar with a lot of how the insight on how the G League and, the CBA, a lot of these professional leagues work, the minor leagues, they do host open tryouts. They let people come out for a tryout, people who have been seen before, who haven't never been seen before. They give them an opportunity to come in, try out. So went to a tryout down in Oklahoma, down with, former player, NBA All-Star, Michael Ray Richardson, worked out. And a lot of people don't know this, but that year that I went down there, I got cut. And after I got cut, the way that the league works is if you get cut, then other teams know, and then other coaches may know about, okay, well, this player's free agent and all that. So the Atlanta Crunk at the time, the Atlanta Crunk Wolverines picked me up for the season. And, I played with them, and then I was able to, build on from that, go play in DC, with the Beltway Bombers, CBA. And then that translated into me, going to a workout with the NBA G League and working out with them. And they actually signed me during the 2011-2012 season from an open tryout as well. So I had good experiences with that. So again, the minor league is a grind. I always tell people it's different from like the NBA game. NBA game is guaranteed contracts. But we were reminded literally 2 or 3 times a week that, hey, we can send you guys home. There's no guaranteed spots in the minor league, so don't get comfortable. That was always embedded in your mind. But I think that makes you stronger. I know it made me stronger just knowing that at any given point, you won't have a job, you'll be sent home. And I think the minor leagues makes you a little bit tougher, in my personal opinion, as opposed to, guys who get drafted and then now you just have 3 or 4 years of, okay, now I have a guaranteed contract. I'm able to just play and ease my way in. In the minor league, especially in the CBA, there was no easing your way in. Like every day you had to battle or you would be sent home.
So that is, it's crazy thing about that. That's the mentality you have to find success there. But this isn't even a basketball lesson. This is like a life lesson. So how did that experience really prepare you for just life in general, as opposed to obviously basketball, but even just what you're doing, anything you put your mind to?
Toughness. I believe that, building relationships is very important. I've always been told that, but I didn't really understand it until I got into the situation. So the good thing about the minor leagues is, yes, it was in a way, a cutthroat league, but building those relationships with teammates, building relationships with the coaches, and also showing that you can do more things than play the game of basketball. You can learn and talk to the general managers, talk to the owners, get to know them on a personal level and say, hey, well, what do you want to do after basketball? And I think I honestly did that a little bit with a few players and also a few general managers at the time, especially the G League. We started having conversations about life after basketball. And I think that kind of prepared me for where I am now at that point. So I would say mental toughness, definitely. Quick story. I can remember 2010, we were in training camp. I couldn't go home for Christmas. The practice schedules were all week except for on Sundays. I believe we had Sundays off, but I think Christmas fell on a Thursday. I believe so. And I remember being like, dang, I want to go home, but we're like, hey, we got practice literally the next day because the season was going to start the next week. So it's just those little things, being away from your family during the holidays, and just all of that it's really a mental grind. I think, like I said, that's prepared me for where I am now and everything that I'm doing right now.
So you mentioned, right, everything, you're preparing for everything you're doing right now. I mean, we're going to get into maybe right now, but maybe right after you finish playing, you got into coaching a lot, right? So what did that look like for you in terms of saying, you know what, maybe my playing career, right? You had that for a few years, but now it's time to impart what I learned from that playing career onto the next generation. How did that maybe pan out for you? And when did you start thinking about that?
Actually, fortunately enough, I got my start actually being around kids back when I was in high school. Ran this program for the unified government back in Kansas City, where, we did like summer sports camps, all of that. So that was really my first taste of being an actual coach. When I got out of college and I was, starting out in the minor league game, My father, Michael Ray, they do free basketball camps around, in the summer times. And my dad was like, hey, why don't you come help me and Michael with these summer camps? Other NBA players are going to be there. This may be some good experience for you. I said, that sounds great. So I went there 2009, I believe it was. And that just really propelled me through, doing through that experience. And then that led me to the Dallas Mavericks. I helped the Dallas Mavericks with their skills academies and things like that for a few years. I, of course, met Dirk and met JJ Barea and a lot of those guys. Michael Finley and those guys would come through. That was a great experience. And again, building relationships with that. And then that just propelled me to the NBA, G League Combine. And also I was fortunate to be able to be a part of the NBA Assistant Coaches Program, which really is like a transition period for players to coaches to see if they really, want to get into coaching. You go to the combines, you go to these pre-drafts, and you coach these players, these incoming Division I top players who are going to get drafted, whether it's to the league or the G League and the combines and things like that. So that was a really good experience, being in there with Vin Baker, Rod Strickland, a lot of these former players that even Vin right now, he, just won a championship last year with the Milwaukee Bucks. And that was awesome to see because I remember those days being in the room with him and Paul Silas and a lot of these guys and, doing these workshops and talking to them, picking their brain, and then seeing him on TV winning a championship was awesome to see. So yeah, that was really the start of, that part of the journey coaching wise to where it is, during the time I was with the NBA doing that.
That is so cool, right? Whether it's the people you got to meet or right, the amount of basketball you get to see, right, at this level of, that's one thing I wanted to ask you about is like, how did that even, like, what do those camps look like? Because I mean, right, seeing these NBA camps, like how did that even become a thing where you can go and end up working them and doing that? Obviously, right, it was through doing it, going to all these different camps, you ended up building a network to do that. But what do those camps even look like? Like who's maybe at those camps? You mentioned some of some of those players in the summertime, but like, what did that even look like to just have that even happen? Like, how did that even come about?
As far as the players, believe what they do with the process is, you already have your top guys who are going to get drafted, your first round, your second round guys. Then you have a lot of people don't realize, well, I'm sure they realize there's basketball players all over the world, all over the United States, including Division I. There's only a small window. I believe it's like maybe 400 something jobs a year for the NBA. Not everybody's going to get that shot. We did have some top Division I players who came in and was able to coach. I think, we forgot the guy's name, a few guys from St. Bonaventure. We had some guys from North Carolina. We had some guys from Kansas. There was a lot of top talent coming into these combines. The process basically is, we go from, I guess you said, the boardroom, a full couple days, almost a week of, just schedules and preparing you how to deal with grown men. Bob McKinnon Jr., whose father was Bob McKinnon Sr., who was a general manager with the New Jersey Nets, longtime NBA guy. Bob McKinnon Jr. has, won a championship, and he's been around, the G League and NBA for a long time. He was actually the main person who was kind of schooling us in the process of the NBA Assistant Coach Program. They brought him in to talk about life off the court. I honestly never thought about this, but because everybody's always thinking on the court stuff, so they would give us a scenario of, okay, well, Sean, let's say if a guy just moved, he's already had his family, 2 or 3 kids, his wife, they're in Chicago, for example. Then the next week he gets traded, Milwaukee, or they get traded to Miami. How are you going to mentor this guy and keep him calm in those situations, even if he has a bad game? If there's a guy who's in a slump and he has personal issues going on, whether it's with, family members, friends, whatever's going on, how are you going to keep him grounded? So those kind of lessons and those kind of things that we talked about really helped me understand, like, dang, this really is not about on the court, how many points somebody scores, all of that. It's really about the off the court and how can we help these people off the court. And I think even more so important even now, I'm going further ahead, but it's like even in 2001, with social media and everything going around, I don't think that the average fan, in my personal opinion, gives these guys credit for, one, being so open. And it's not really open on their parts. I mean, yes, you have some NBA guys who aren't involved in social media, but their salaries, for example, are posted. Everybody knows what you make. Everybody knows where you live. Everybody knows all of that information. And it's like, sometimes these guys don't get a break. So they have a lot to handle, and I just think that the average fan, if they understood, except for just playing basketball, if they looked at, it's just a game, yes, it's a great game, but these guys are human. At the end of the day, these guys do have kids. These guys do have wives and families and things like that. So I think if we took in the human part of it and realized what these guys, go through on a day-to-day, I think they would be perceived a lot better than what some people say about them.
Definitely. And I'm so happy you went into that, because that's a conversation I really haven't even heard, really thinking about players in that way. It's something people don't really talk about a lot. And it's a conversation that I think has to be had, because it's a way of seeing players that maybe only people that have been where you've been, that have coached at that level, have seen. But not everyone's really looking at it that way, which I think, right, whether us as fans or even like coaches at younger levels have to think about all the time, which is what I wanted to ask you about, because you went from that to right now, whether it's coaching at the high school level or all these companies you've started with camps and being around the youth side of basketball. How did seeing the pro level, or really dealing with guys and the problems they have at the pro level, right, whether it's socially, like you just said, moving to a new city and all the challenges that come with that, how did that prepare you for dealing with kids who deal with problems? They have stuff like that they fight, obviously not in the same way, but they still deal with. I mean, I whether it's the kids I coach when they were freshmen, same kids that I coach as freshmen, now I'm coaching them on the varsity level as seniors. And they all have their demons. They all have the things that bother them. And I have to maybe, as the young coach, figure out, how do we have this conversation? How do I help with that? While also, right, keeping that boundary there. It's tough.
When it comes to the kids, I think, honestly, that's more easier. I know some people may say, oh, how's that easy? They're rambunctious, they're this, they're that. But to me, I have a lot of patience. So kids are much easier because they're starting to learn the process. And when it comes to basketball, they're learning the game. So with the kids, you want to try to keep it as basic as possible, especially when it comes to development, the skills. The most important thing we always tell them, have fun. If kids aren't having fun with the game, they're not going to play hard. So me being at the high school level, that was a really good experience for me. I think the first year, I believe we went 18-2. And then the next year, it was a big drop off because, in high school, it's a different wave of kids that come in. So I think the next year was like maybe 4 and something. So that kind of tested, and it was due to, it was the talent level, honestly, that we had that first year was definitely better than the one we had the second year. But still, it was still a teaching lesson for me. It was still, even though the talent's not there, we're going to go ahead and revamp some things when it comes to schedules. We're going to revamp some things when it comes to practices. We're going to focus more on skill development work, as opposed to that first year. It was more game type situations because the skill level was already there. So you have to kind of understand what you're doing as far as who you're dealing with. But at the end of the day, on both sides of that, especially in the high school level, it comes down to having fun. To me, it wasn't really a challenge. I think that, having fun and just teaching the fundamentals of the game and seeing if they want to figure it out. A lot of these kids nowadays, they're 2-3 sport athletes. It was kind of, rare when Deion Sanders, Bo Jackson, even back in the day, Deion was a 3-sport athlete, I believe. So a lot of these guys, now 3-sport athlete is the norm. I just think that, I've had parents ask me, well, coach, do you think that we're doing too much with our kids? You think we should do this? And I was like, well, honestly, that's up to the kid. I understand you want to expose your kids to multiple sports, but in my personal opinion, once it starts to get to where they're getting burnt out or they're showing, some tiredness, I don't think that's really beneficial. A quick story, I was working this kid out a few years ago and he was 9th grade, I believe. And we're doing just some skill work. But before he came in, he told me, he was like, yeah, I just left swimming practice and also had soccer practice the other day. And I was like, okay, so how are you feeling right now? He was like, I'm kind of tired. Me, honestly, the way I am, I could have, well, not me personally, but I know there were coaches that could say, you know what, well, that's fine, but this is my program. We're going to do what we do with this program. I was like, well, look, I'll switch up what I'm doing today. We're not going to do as much running. We'll do more just ball handling and some shooting as opposed to some conditioning. And that's the kind of relationship that you have to have. And you have to, it's like a give and take. If they say something, you got to be there, even though you're the leader to them. You have to understand that they're the player. You're trying to get the maximum effort out of them. And it's no different on the pro level, especially in the pro level, pro game, playing 82 plus games, if you're fortunate to make the playoffs. So even at that level, you have, of course, more trainers, you have, they're more professional, they're more experienced, they know how to pace themselves, but it's still the mental game of the mental strain of traveling, playing, family, practices, media, all that stuff. But I think it's a good balance if you know what you're doing across the board.
I love the examples you gave, and especially the one where you spoke about the drop off between your first and your second year of coaching, because I smiled because I related to that big time. My first year, with the two best players in the league, when they both were there, we steamrolled through everybody. It was easy. It was like that. Oh, winning just became natural. The second year wasn't the case. I was a part of a losing team for the first time, and even that was an adjustment for me, let alone the kids, obviously, right? You know, you're coming from middle school and you win every game, and now it's not really happening. And that was a tough thing for me to overcome. And I learned a lot of. I learned way more from the losing season than I did the one where we won every game. So that's, I mean, and you said game prep versus skill development prep. That's all we did. That second, we knew it from the start. We need to get these guys better, so that when they get to varsity, they're ready to go. Now, is that the case right now? TBD. We'll figure that out this season.
Right.
But hopefully that's what takes place. But I loved, right? I mean, especially everything with relationships. That's my forte when it comes to anything coaching related, like that. Having that conversation, and you just gave a lot of lessons. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it and take notes of, because that's one thing I can. Even though I think that's my best skill, I can always get better at it. And that's one thing that I pride myself in, is having that conversation, talking to guys, relating to them, and letting them know that you're there for them. That's what you laid out, but you kind of gave so many examples. I'm gonna have to look into that a lot more and keep getting better at it, because that's my thing, man. I love that stuff.
But I mean, you seem real personable right now. You seem like you know what you're doing, so it's all good.
I appreciate that. But you can still get better, always get better. That's always got to be the best at what you love to do, and that's kind of whether it's film, I like doing a lot too. But when it comes to like actually talk, it's funny. Like film, you would think film and talking to people are two different things, but I kind of do both. Those are my two things. Other stuff like screaming and yelling, drills. Nah, it's not me. I can't do that stuff at a high level, but the other stuff I can do really well. So that's, figuring out what you do best, and also being able to help other people with that. It's a dream come true. But that's why I really appreciate you going into that, and how that high school experience, was maybe shaped by what you had already done at the pro level, but then also the differences. People don't think about that stuff. And that's why I find absolutely fascinating. But you spoke about your high school coaching job, but you do so much more when it comes to youth sports. I mean, whether it's Nothing But Net, which you did in 2015, a couple other, we're going to talk now too about all you've been, let me see here. I had a list written down because I had to keep track of it all. Obviously the Brooklyn Nets event, you've done stuff in Houston, Miami, Atlanta, NBA All-Star Weekend, Chicago, man. Okay. Maybe we just start there, but there's so much here, right? You've done so many cool events all over the country. I mean, talk to us about that. Like how did those happen? And what are those all about?
That goes back to, again, starting out, when I was younger and just kind of snowballed into, playing and all of that. Same thing off the court. I got into starting my own training business, Nothing But Net Sports, in 2015, had my first camp, and it was received really well. And the next camp received well, and the next camp, and this kind of built on that. Started doing more camps, clinics, individual workouts, and all of that. And then I had the opportunity to branch off. I was still doing the summer camps and things like that with the Mavericks, of course, with my dad in Florida and everything. And I was talking to the kids, the stories that we were hearing, a lot of off the court stories, honestly, a few horror stories that kids deal with on a day-to-day, whether it's with family, personal issues, abuse, all that kind of stuff. We were hearing these stories. And in my mind, I was like, okay, how can I give back in a different way? Because like I'm sure you go to these basketball camps or any camp really, and a lot of the kids, you get gear, you get shoes, you get this, and you may get a life lesson here and there, but it's something, it's not really, in my personal opinion, really impactful that's going to be like change somebody's life totally. I came up with this idea, American Ballers, to sort of give back to the kids nationally. It's free camps and clinics nationally for youth, ages 7 to 17. We partner with NBA organizations, and I bring in former NBA and WNBA players, as well as current NBA and WNBA players, to talk about, of course, interact with them basketball skills wise. We do camps and things like that, but also education workshop. And the education workshop can be a list of topics that we have, entrepreneurship, health and wellness, personal finance, social awareness, bullying, all the things that these kids are dealing with off the court. And we actually have activities and workshops that entail with that. And, for example, you mentioned Chicago, we've been able to have some momentum. I think my first event was in Brooklyn a few years back at the Barclays Center. From that, we went to the Lakers. And from that, we went to, the Orlando Magic. And then we had two events at, Chicago All-Star Weekend, which was very fortunate to have Joe Tsai and Clara Tsai, the owners of the Brooklyn Nets, come out and speak to those kids at Dunbar Vocational High School. That's another thing that, the public really doesn't know about a lot of these athletes or even owners. A lot of these people are invested in the community. A lot of these people are invested in projects, in schools and things like that. So they wanted to come out, take a tour of the school, during All-Star Weekend. And, Joe, he's a very nice guy. He granted the kids, they didn't know it. It was a surprise. But after going around the school and talking to the kids, it's like, you know what? I'm going to invite everybody to the All-Star game on Sunday night. And we actually have video of it. Kids just went berserk, on the court. They're like, oh, jumping up and down, like, because they'd never been to an All-Star game before, let alone maybe NBA game. So they were all excited. Oh, my goodness, we're going to the United Center and all that stuff. So that was a cool moment. Unfortunately, COVID hit during, I believe, March, really started to hit March, April time. So that kind of put a damper on a lot of things for American Ballers. But fortunately, after the summer in June, we picked back up with WNBA player Tiffany Hayes down in Atlanta. I reached out to her and we're like, hey, we have some kids down in Atlanta that we like to get involved with these camps and things like that. And then that led to the next one. I believe the next one was Houston, New Jersey, and Miami. And then we just wrapped one up on Monday at the Barclays Center, the Education Park, where I brought out 4 Brooklyn entrepreneurs to speak to the kids. Buck Williams, former NBA All-Star, and my dad did the basketball clinic. And then the Brooklyn Nets allowed us to, have our education platform at the venue as well for those kids, where we did an hour and 45-minute educational workshop. And these Brooklyn entrepreneurs came out. We did like a Shark Tank type event to where, the kids can create their own business and then they pitch to us and then, they get a prize and all that kind of stuff. So it was a great event. So yeah, I'm having fun with it. Nothing but net sports, American Ballers, Global Ballers, which is, the overseas component that we have as far as, and also apparel, Global Balls apparel, and also Beyond the Court. We've had a podcast just like yourself, a podcast doing Beyond the Court. We've had Chris Broussard and a lot of these guys, to come on and talk about everything off the court and what they're doing. So I'm having a ball right now.
Love it. Okay. Then I was about to ask you about the podcast you guys are doing, because anything with content creation, right? I mean, obviously it's awesome, all the coaching stuff, and that really impacts the lives of kids and lives and stuff. But I love everything when it comes to content creation, and everything you outlined just now, all these events you did are incredible. But it really stood out to me when I saw you did the show too, that you do it, in person, when you see people, you interact with them. Obviously you coach them and you help them out with their lives and stuff, but you also, take time out of your day when you're home to do this podcast. So what's that experience been like for you, talking to, people that are professionals in their industry, experts at what they do, but then also giving back that same knowledge to people listening from wherever they are?
The podcast actually happened by accident. So, and I say that because when COVID hit, we were used to having players, fly out to these events and things like that. But then you had guys, who are a little older, Rick Barry, former NBA MVP, All-Star, Hall of Famer, George Gervin, Artis Gilmore. A lot of these guys at the time during COVID didn't really feel comfortable getting on a plane and, flying. Totally understandable. And I said, how can we reach these kids and reach our audience out, doing an event right now, because it was kind of, hit and miss with these events. I was like, we should just do a podcast. I'll call it Beyond the Court, and we'll just invite these guys to come on and talk about their experiences. My very first guest was Jeffrey Jordan, Michael's oldest son. Know Jeffrey very well. Actually met him for the first time back in 2014 in New Orleans at the All-Star Weekend in New Orleans. And, it was good. We struck up a conversation, and, he had a great conversation, on our podcast about, of course, Michael and The Last Dance and his upbringing, in the Jordan household and their stories and all of that. And then BJ Armstrong was the next, and then, of course, I have my mother on. And I've had my father on, and I've had Chris Broussard and numerous people, Marcus Johnson, UCLA legend, Artis Gilmore, Hall of Famer, and, CJ Watson. So the list goes on and on, just them telling their stories and giving a lot of information whereas a lot of the audience, I would say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, really? I didn't know that. I always get that after every episode. I always get the, dang, you know what? I like that episode, and I did not know that about him. So I think that's always a great thing, for even more so for the audience to know. And that way it gives them a chance to look at these players, like I said, in a different light.
So cool, right? And that's the same reason why I do my show, right? Even talk to all these people. Number one, right? I'm getting to meet new people, and that's super exciting to me. But also, right, getting to you know how many texts I get from every episode, like, wow, like that person's story is so cool. And what excites me too is, like, for a lot of my guests, their first podcast, and for that reason, their story never gets to be told like that until the show, and they're so excited to give it, and I'm so excited to listen to it and kind of put it out there. So I love that you're making content like that and you're helping people that way, whether it's the guests you have on your show or obviously the people listening to it, if they get to learn from it and stuff. stuff. And it's just exciting all around. I love content creation is my favorite thing in the world. So love that you're a fellow content creator and doing that stuff. And that stood out to me big time when I saw that. Obviously just in terms of the initiative to do that and start that during COVID, just like I did with my show. It's really cool. But you're also right. I mean, you've mentioned all these different brands. Like there's so many, right there, whether companies that you've started or things that you've been aligned with or events that you've gone to through different partnerships with other people. Like I know Junior Nets, right? I mean, that's something I'm heavily involved in through Super League. One of my longtime coaches, he was the Junior Nets Coach of the Year back in 2020. It was pretty cool. They did a whole thing at the Barclays Center. Sean Marks gave him a trophy and stuff right before COVID, actually. So we just got that in there. I think it was like 2-3 days before the NBA shut down. It was crazy. But like the junior, like great organization, all these cool things, but I feel like they're all under this umbrella of 83 Ventures, if I'm mistaken, right? You do kind of all these things under that umbrella. So can you please elaborate on what that maybe means and what's under that umbrella? It seems like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so 83 Ventures, I actually started that as the hub. That's the holding company for all of the businesses, born in 1983. So that's really how I came up with 83 Ventures. And I wanted it to be personal, because to me, in my personal opinion, when you start a business, it's really an investment. You're investing in yourself, just like you have a business, podcast and everything. So you're really investing in your time, you're investing in yourself. So I wanted to, have a company brands that could, that really reach an audience, almost like a game changer in a way. And I feel like, actually, I know that when it comes to, nothing but net and, American Ballers and Global Ballers, we've definitely made an impact in the communities. Especially all the cities we go to, we always get positive feedback from the kids. When you guys coming back, when you guys gonna do this, we love to have you again. So that's the great thing about, having a business. And that's what we try to tell these kids, even at the entrepreneurship workshop we did the other night, try to tell these kids that, hey, it's okay to have a job. There's nothing wrong with having a job, because I've had jobs, but it's like at the same time, I think COVID and a lot of things that have happened, let us know that it's okay to find something you're interested in also as a side hustle, a side job, just in case, something doesn't go well at your work. There's a lot of people who unfortunately, got laid off or something like that. And it was almost like, well, what am I going to do? In my personal opinion, it can come down to, we try to tell these kids, find something you're interested in now, even for 7th grade. The entrepreneurs that we had come in, they weren't from money. They didn't come from money. They didn't have, a mom or a dad who were affluent. One gentleman, James Johnson, who's a local Brooklyn entrepreneur, who's an architect as well. He said, look, I worked a job and then I saved up, $30,000 over time, from my job that I had. And then I wanted to branch off and do something that I wanted to do. And that's just snowballed, for him. So that's sort of the message that we try to talk to these kids about. And that's really why I have 83 Ventures and these businesses, to try to share a message of kids. You can start you a bubblegum shop. You can start you a lemonade stand, as well as, also working. But you can also find other interests right now, as opposed to when you get, after college. Okay, I go to college and then I'm 23, 24. What am I going to do? And unfortunately, that's where a lot of kids are and adults are right now. But we just, like I said, I'm having fun with it. And, I know the parents are having fun with it and the kids are having fun. So 83 Ventures has been good, to me, and I'm just trying to continue to grow. I'm still growing. I'm still learning every day. I don't have it all figured out. I'm enjoying the process of still meeting people within these organizations and talking and picking their brains and just moving forward,
Eliminating those question marks. What do I do? What can I do? What do I do now? That's incredible, right? Thinking about how you're helping do that and help take those question marks out of the equation, because that's not a good place to be, is right, to have those questions and that anxiety over what's next, right? You're helping with that, and that's awesome. But I mean, I'm sure there's some, in terms of what's next, you must have a lot of cool stuff coming up next. Like, what's the next event? What's coming up soon for, whether it's, obviously everything under the 83 Ventures umbrella?
Well, the training aspects, for nothing but net sports, that's the day to day. But when it comes to American Ballers and, Global Ballers, we have some things cooking up right now. Can't really get into a lot of specifics, but I can tell you, when we worked out the partnership with the Nets, it was a 6-month process as far as celebrating and highlighting the 75th, NBA anniversary. So that was the first event that we had on Monday. The next event will be January, and then February, March, April, and May. And it's going to be, the cool thing is we're doing events in each location that the Brooklyn Nets franchise / New Jersey Nets franchise has been in since 1976. So in Brooklyn, and then I believe we'll be at East Rutherford, where the Nets played. And then we'll be, a few places in New York. And then we're also working on some things for NBA All-Star Weekend in Cleveland right now. So yeah, it's a lot of things going on. And that's separate from the Nets, but that will be fortunately with the NBA. So those are the upcoming things that we have coming up on that end.
Exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to just seeing it all take shape from afar and seeing all that stuff happen. And right, you being in New York, that's just super cool, right? Having all these things, right? So much moving and shaking going on. It's just a lot of fun. And I really want to appreciate you coming on the show and sharing that with us, because I'm sure our listeners, right, learned so much about it. I mean, I learned a lot about it, especially the relatability stuff. That was huge. But there's so many other lessons to know about. Okay, starting early, as soon as you can. My biggest thing is age is just, when I say age is just a number, it literally, I think it means nothing towards when you can start and when you can do what you want to do. So, I mean, whether it's with kids, whether it's with people that are older, that's a great message that you're sending out. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us here.
I don't know if you follow him. Actually, it's a funny story. Being out here in New York City, I've run into just people so randomly. You're walking on the street. I ran into him a couple weeks ago on the street, and we struck up a conversation. And, he had his Knicks shirt on. He's a big avid Knicks fan. And we just started talking for a little bit. Of course, he's from New Jersey. He remembered my father playing. But he's an advocate for, even if you're 60 and 70 years old, he's like, you can always start. So to your point, I've really been a component of, I'm 38 years old, but I know I've been doing this for, a few years now. If you have a passion, in my opinion, do it, start it. I think I can take, I know a lot of people don't like to take risks, which is fine. Everybody's built differently. But I was just, born, I think, to, go out and take risks. If it doesn't work, that's fine. I think basketball teaches that. And I think you can attest to that. Basketball teaches us wins and losses. And I tell these kids, at the end of the day, sports alone, it teaches you how to take a loss. If you get beat even on a national scale or a local scale where your friends are watching and you take that kind of humiliation of losing, and then the next day you can bounce back up, it's the same thing as the game of life to me. And I think that's why I have a tough exterior as far as I can take a lot, because I've been used to playing the game of basketball since I was 7 years old. I've taken wins and I've also taken a lot of losses through this whole process. But even through the losses, I still enjoy it because it's a learning lesson. And it's always, I've always believed that it's only way, the only way is up, for me.
Hearing you talk just throughout the show, I already knew you were a big Gary Vee fan. And that's one thing when I talk about age, he's a big catalyst for this show. He's a big inspiration for this show because all he preaches is making content. So I've seen so many episodes of him saying, do 100 episodes of a podcast and see what happens. That's why I did 300. I did that so I could have that and have that conversation with people, or to have that as a background. And he was his content was such a big push for that. It was huge to me. And I'm curious, was that day you met him after the November 1st? It was a Wednesday game against the Cavaliers. I'm sorry, a Sunday game against the Cavaliers. Was that day? Because he was at the next game. It was afterward. Yeah, because I took a quick selfie with him on the court. So the one perk of the job is getting on the court. So I saw everyone kind of crowding him from the stands. They were all going over the thing to get him. I'm like, okay, I'm going to just loop right around, try to snag a picture with him. I've never seen him in person before. Obviously, I really got into him when COVID started, right before COVID started. So I walked all around, asked for a quick selfie. It's funny, my outside camera was on, and he goes, dude. And he just pressed it to front facing. He was like, come on. And then snapped the pic. I wanted to tell him the whole, podcast thing, but he was in a rush to get out of there. Maybe it'll happen in the next game soon. He's now Gary's the man. So he really was a big reason why I do what I do. He's someone that I would love to have on the show, obviously. So we'll see if that ever comes again when he's at another Knicks game. I get to spot him in the crowd and make that pitch, or give him some socks, which you're about to get some socks too. I don't know if you've seen on Instagram, the Gen Z Hoop socks. They're coming for you. So you'll be looking stylish. I would never let you leave the show without knowing that you're about to get decked out. Your wardrobe's about to be looking pretty fresh. So looking forward to hopefully meeting up with you soon in New York City, and so happy we got to do this and share these stories back and forth. And anyone that's got their mentality right and listens to Gary Vee, I'm just happy to know them and get to talk to them more, and we'll learn from each other. So it's great.
I appreciate you having me on, John. And like I said, the merch, I appreciate the merch. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.